the official...
Well, you have to call the meeting to order.
I guess do.
You want to ask for if there's any public comment not on the agenda?
Is there any public comment on items not on the agenda? Seeing none?
We'll find somebody.
The adoption of minutes for May 23rd, 2011.
So do we have a motion regarding the adoption of meeting minutes for May 23rd, 2011?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Groner?
Okay, thank you. Oh. Is that me? Aye.
I can answer for you.
Commissioner McGriff?
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe?
Abstain.
Commissioner Henkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Kidwell?
Aye.
All right. Motion passes 401.
There's enough to pass.
Okay, all right. Okay. You can still vote on it.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the Planning Commission hearing. We have two modifications, MD 11-1 and MD 11-2.
Thank you, Chair Kidwell. Tonight there are two public hearings, but they're related. So what I propose we do is we run through the quasi-judicial public hearing processes. I'll just do it once. Then you'll hear the matter all at once, and then you'll make two decisions, separate decisions on the two different applications before you. Two public hearings on land use applications are scheduled for tonight. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before tonight's hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report along with written comments and input received through the public notification process for each application. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart right on that wall. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name. Testimony and evidence shall be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe that other criteria apply, in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials mailed to the city staff during the time period which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public hearing portion of this hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision to which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the Commission's consideration. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be judged appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, RS 197-7696 requires us to announce the following. The failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. We will now open the hearing for both MD 1101 and 1102. Does any commissioner have any ex parte contacts, conflict of interest, bias, any other statements to declare?
I do. I am familiar with the site, and I have visited on many occasions, and I visited again prior to the meeting. But I did not speak with anyone.
I also visited the site and the neighborhood, the thoroughfare, as well as the church today.
Nothing to declare.
I visited the site and grew up right there, so know it well. Nothing else to declare.
Anyone in the audience wish to question the planning commissioners about any of these site visits or anything? Seeing none, it's okay with you, we'll commence with the staff report.
Yes.
So Mrs. Tearaway is going to be giving the staff presentation tonight. We had a little bit of trouble uploading the attachments into your Granicus tonight, so I have hard copies. I believe I've given them to everyone who it appeared didn't have them, but I do have extra copies if you do need the exhibits. The staff report will come up on Granicus, though. And with that, if you need a copy, let me know, and we'll turn it over to Laura to give the presentation.
Right.
Pete, you're looking well this evening.
He's out of town, so I'll be presenting his staff report for you this evening. Before we get into the modification, let's get a little more familiar with the site. As you know, it's located on South End near Partlow. There are two properties involved in these modifications. You can see on the aerial photo, the fire station is to the south of the church. Then on the zoning designation, this area of town is primarily residential, with the zoning designations identified on the map. So let's take a closer look at each one of the sites involved in the applications. The first is the South End Fire Station. In 2001, a fire station was approved on the site. At this time, the church was already existing to the north. It's the Oregon City Church. With the conditional use application, there was site plan design review, and you can tell a little bit about the site looking at the aerial photo. There is a parking lot to the north of the site, and it's shared between the church and the fire station. And then the fire station gains access from Lafayette Avenue to the south of the site in the form of a driveway now. And then they exit the site with their fire trucks onto South End Road. With this configuration, fire trucks can just pull into the site from Lafayette and then exit onto South End Road, so they don't have to back into the site on South End. So north of the site is the Oregon City United Methodist Church. It was finalized in 1998, so relatively new. It was existing when the fire station was constructed. The church decided in 2007 to separate off the back portion of the property for future land divisions. With this, they submitted a zone change for the property. It was at that time zoned R10, which is a 10,000 square foot minimum, and they received approval for a zone change to R8, which is an 8,000 square foot minimum, both single family dwellings. With that partition, you can see the location of the partition lines there on the map. There was a variance that was required because we don't allow partitions where both lots can be subdivided. And with that, they wanted to figure out where a future road would be located in order to have a future subdivision, but they weren't looking to divide the property at that time, just a two-lot partition. So the church land would be reduced and the other land would go back to single-family residential without a conditional use on that. With that, they submitted that shadow plat for 14-lot subdivision. The shadow plat is not binding whatsoever. It was just in with all of the conditional use and all of the other documentation. They used that shadow plat to help figure out where this property line should go. So what's changing from these applications? The shadow plat that was submitted had the street going across the north section of the fire station directly into South End Road. Now, the applicant is proposing to change that location so it turns and comes out Lafayette Avenue. With this application, it's important to note there's absolutely no development that's occurring. We're just changing the location on the shadow plat, and with that, we'll have to modify conditional uses. I'll go through that in just a minute. So with this, again, there's absolutely no development that's occurring at this time. And the arrows show the road going south, but obviously you can go either direction. So let's take a look at this access plan a little bit closer. as you can see from the aerial photo, the road was supposed to go where that parking lot is, to the north of the fire station. And now it will turn and go over Oak Tree Park, which is a city park. In order to accommodate this, there was a traffic study which was done, and the new alignment was found to be acceptable for safety, sight distance, and intersection spacing. The intersection spacing is slightly less than our minimum requirement, but we allowed the city engineer to approve that. And it would have actually been the same sight distance either way if it came out on South End Road or Lafayette Avenue. The traffic impacts of this is actually zero because there's no development occurring. This is just changing the location of the street. But they anticipate up to 210 daily trips. A lot of those are going to be from other people, maybe up Josephine, which is the name of that road, coming down the new street. The 210 also includes the impact of the proposed subdivision in the future, which again hasn't been submitted at this time. So why are they doing all this? The fire station was built, and then the church partition happened 6 years later. In that same year, the city annexed into the fire district for Clackamas County Fire District Number 1. The fire district differed as to the appropriateness of the street location, and that's why we're changing the location. Both parties have agreed to the proposed location. Since the new location is going through a city park, we do have a city charter that requires that all parkland be dedicated to park use only. And since the street is not a park, it went before city voters and was approved in 2010. So what are we modifying? Let's start with the fire station. They had the conditional use and site plan again in 2000. The things that we're changing are the location of the street, because that's going to change the location of their parking, since the parking along the north side will stay instead of go. With this modification, we're really only looking at the things that are changing. We're not looking at everything that we look at in an original application. We're only looking at what's affected by this change, such as sight distance of the new road. This fire station will have to come in for a minor site plan design review if and when they proceed with this application, and likely a partition or some sort of land division as well, since they're showing a street through their property and then property on the other side of that property as well. So there's no street design yet because we're not doing any land division yet. We're just looking at the idea of the street going through the property. And if the street does go through the property, then the amount of land dedicated to the fire station use is smaller, because they're going to dedicate some to right-of-way, and then there'll be that piece on the other side of the property. So this
Can you point to that?
So let's see.
I'm pretty sure I know where it is.
Yeah, so the fire station received a conditional use for everything in this area. Since we're changing that and putting a street through here, and then something's happening with this, the conditional use will now only apply to this area.
So what's going to happen to where if I can read it correctly, it says tax lot 403?
This one? Well, it doesn't exist yet, so we don't know.
Well, I mean, I'm
Because-
assuming that's still part of their tax lot. That's
Well,
the fire station.
if they want to
The
separate
tax
it,
lot 403 is proposed.
if they want to
Is that
separate
correct?
it from their tax lot, they'll have
Well,
to
I thought it
do.
was still, that was theirs, because that hasn't been separated.
Right.
Okay.
The orange defines their property now,
Right.
and this isn't changing their property, but when this occurs, their property will be reduced by 7,700 square feet. So the CU won't apply to the street or whatever the property is north of there. It'll just apply to the fire station. So why are we modifying the church? A couple of reasons on the church. One is that, as you can tell, let's see. As you can tell here, this is the approved lot lines. So if you mentally block out the fire station, this is where the lot line is for the minor partition that was approved in 2007. And this is the lot line for what they want to do. It bulbs out a little bit there. It's a little bit different to accommodate that new street design. Also, parcel 2, which is where the church is, gets a little bit bigger, and parcel 1, which would be where the land division would get a little bit smaller. At this point, again, the land division's in the future, so we're just looking at this 2-lot partition and how it's affected by this modification. In this case, again, parcel 2 had a conditional use dedicated for X square feet, and now that square footage is changing as well. So there's a couple code sections that apply.
Before you do that, Laura,
yeah.
can you go back?
Sure.
How is parcel 2 getting bigger and parcel 1 getting
That's
smaller?
exactly where I was trying to see.
I can bring the applicant up, and they can show you in a little bit more detail. Visually, the only thing you can really see here is that bulb out.
Right.
And that line's moved a little bit.
And I
It's-
can see that, but
It's only 4,000 square feet, so it's kind of blended in there, but the applicant
See where
can.
this line is right there? There it looks like they plan to put some sort of an addition.
right, but that doesn't change where that line is.
No, it
So
isn't.
The applicant can show you on a map. I'll bring it back up when they're
that's fine. I'll wait till they're up there.
Okay. So code criteria, we have a couple of things. One is minor partition, conditional use, site plan design review, variance because there was a variance with the original partition of the church, and our zoning designations. As you'll notice, R10 and R8. Again, the church is zoned R8 because they had that zone change. As the zone change stuck with the property, it doesn't need to be modified in this case. And then the fire station is R10. So what are we looking at for criteria? Again, we're looking at only the things affected by this modification. The one that comes is the most significant is the conditional use criteria. Since this modification isn't really creating any impact, there's no more traffic, there's no more people coming to the site or noise or anything like that. We determined that there is nothing to mitigate. So with that, we recommended one condition of approval. The condition of approval is to show the city a recorded document between the church and the fire station before the church partition is complete. So we want to know, before this parcel 1 and parcel 2 is separate, that there is at least a recorded agreement between the two parties that this will go forward. And with that, are there any questions? Yeah.
Back on several pages back, and I don't know exactly where it was, yeah, keep going. There was a statement that, okay, stop. Yeah. Second, X, the fire district differed as to the appropriateness of a future street network. What is that all about?
The applicant can explain that more to you. That's the only information that the city had, is that they wanted to change the location of the street on their site.
Was that because of the change in administration of the fire station? Don't know. Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm very interested in hearing what the applicant has to say, but I'm more interested in hearing what the staff's information is about it, and what does that really mean?
It doesn't really affect, the Y doesn't really affect this, because we look at just the impacts of the street location, and are there any impacts of that different
Well,
location?
unfortunately, I was not here when this decision was made originally, so I am trying in my
Yes.
head to understand what the sequence of events was, and that kind of jumped right out at me, and I said, okay, well, did they think that there was not a need for a street, or?
Because there was the street in the original shadow plat, which again is not binding. So we're just setting ourselves up for the future.
Sounds like it's
Going through
getting
there.
kind of binding.
Can you take us back to the slide that showed the previous approval and this? Okay, so as I understand it, the original approval had this street attaching it directly out to South End Road.
Yeah, it's right here. Josephine Street was in the shadow plat in the partition on the original.
And so,
Which-
so now the new proposed street is going to Lafayette.
It will go through and turn rather than go straight. So the only thing changing is there.
Is there a preference by the traffic engineering on whether that proposed street attaches to South End or to Lafayette?
The applicant did have a transportation study done, and the transportation engineer, we do try and limit driveways off South End Road or road accesses from South End Road. But there is no specific preference, just that the new location is safe. With sight distance, traffic volumes, nothing's going to fail at this intersection.
Or did you mean it's safer than the previous proposal?
There wasn't a comparison
Oh,
between
okay.
the two. It was just an analysis of this one, that the sight distance is a little shyer than our city standard, and that would be the most concerning. But the transportation engineers have looked at it, and our city consultant John Riplinger of Riplinger Associates concurred that sight distance is appropriate. And actually, it's 350 feet. It would also be 350 feet the other direction if it were to go straight into South End Road. But we do try and limit accesses off major roads so that they can maintain that level of service and higher speed limits and things like that.
Are there any other questions by the commissioners?
No, not at this
Not yet.
time, if that's okay.
Do we move on to the applicant presentation now?
Yep.
Okay.
Leave that one.
Nope. Keep it at the wall.
Oh, go for the wall.
Here.
Good evening. My name is Tom Sissel. I'm a consulting engineer, and I've been working on behalf of the Oregon City United Methodist Church in regards to this application for about 5 years now. And before I go too far, I just wanted to mention that Ed Kurtzhofer, the fire chief, is planning to attend. I told him that I thought any questions for him wouldn't be right at 7, and so I think he's going to arrive sometime closer to 8 o'clock if you have questions for him. In regards to some of the questions you raised, I'll probably go right into those. And I realize that when this was heard in front of the Planning Commission, I think in 2008, many of you were not on the board, and if you were on the commission, and if you were, you've probably forgotten about this since then. But some of the questions I wrote down here, you were questioning why parcel 2 was larger in this application than it was in the original. If you look at the plan that's on the screen, which I assume is on your screen in front of you, you can see that what I'll call a finger between the
You might
church.
be able to use that mouse to make an arrow over here. There we go.
Okay. This area right there, you can see the difference in the width there, and you compare it over here, and it's much narrower. The road got shifted away from the church building with this alignment. There was also, in this area here, there was a small difference. The actual right-of-way would have been slightly beyond the fire district's parcel there, and so they gained a little bit, but the main difference was just this adjustment of this line, shifting in this direction a little bit. The reason the change of the road, when this went through the first time, as Laura mentioned, it was the fire district, this fire station was a city property. It was owned by the city of Oregon City. And then shortly after the approval, the fire district, there was a public vote, and the fire district came into being for the city of Oregon City, and it took over this entity. And the church wanted to move forward quickly to getting the partition recorded and resolved, but they had to wait while the negotiations between the city and the fire district were done, and there was a completed and land transferred. And so that took probably on the order of 18 months for just that to get past that point. And then the first meeting we had with the actual fire district, with Ed and with the board of directors for the fire district, they indicated that they just didn't feel that the street coming out, this proposed future street coming out, Josephine, coming out to South End Road is where they really wanted it, because they didn't want to have this street this close to their exit for their fire vehicles. They just felt there was going to be a conflict there. So we had a discussion about where else it could go, and they were open, and I think, in fact, suggested the idea about bringing it behind their fire station out to Lafayette. We had some concerns on the church's side at that point that might be an issue with the city, but the city actually was okay with that connection, because originally we thought it had to go out the South End Road. So we went through the process. There was the public vote, and to allow it to go. That was a key for this. And the other benefit to that in the future is that the intersection at Partlow and South End Road is in Lafayette, though that's now a four-way intersection, will, I understand, be a signalized intersection, so that provides that additional benefit as well. And this is why the church has come back here and modified their partition request, is to meet the fire district's request or requirement. They weren't going to the option, once the fire district became owners of that land, they were not going to allow an agreement to allow it to go directly at the South End Road. So this is really the only option we had to get through with the fire district. And, there was other options considered, but this was the only thing feasible. And so we've worked through the process, and actually the fire district's been very good about this. They put the church in a bind by saying they didn't want it to go out the South End Road directly, but after that point, they've been very good about helping us and working through this, so we have no complaints with the fire district at all. I think I've answered the questions, but if I haven't, please let me know. I did have one question, though, of planning staff, and I know Laura's just taking over for Peter here, but I thought I heard that you say that there wasn't a site plan modification for the fire district parcel, but I believe that is.
There's a site plan modification. There is a modification of the site plan, but there was no landscaping plan associated with that, so that still has to get worked out.
Yes.
It'll come back later as a minor site plan design review, which we can do outside that conditional use process.
Okay. And then I remember there was one other question about the parcel on the backside of this future extension of Josephine, how that would be dealt with. And we had a discussion about that in one of the meetings we had with the city about that. And my understanding is simply putting a right-of-way across a parcel does not make it a partition, that it's still one tax lot until such time as the fire district, if they wish to partition off that rear or sell it, would have to be done by a partition or a lot line adjustment or something like that. But at this point, the fire station, and if that street were to be built today, that fire station and the parcel behind it would be the same tax lot. When the church started this process in 2006, there was some hope that there would be a nice market for them to sell parcel 1 to a developer and get some funds out of it and retire some debt. That hope is now longer into the future, but that's still their hope. The church doesn't plan to develop this as a subdivision on their own. Their intent would be to sell it to a developer somewhere down the line. And they're trying to get everything in line to allow that to happen with the partition, with the agreement with the fire district and so forth. So that's why this application's been made. The church is the applicant on both of these hearings, or both of these modifications you have going on this evening. The fire district is the owner in one of them, but the church is the applicant in both of them, because it is to their benefit in both cases. I think that's all I have, unless you have questions.
Are there any questions for the applicant? David?
Yeah, and I'm not sure it's for you or Laura, so since you're both here, it's so convenient. The agreement that you referred to between the fire station and the church about the road, is that the entirety of Josephine would be the responsibility of the developer of Parcel 1, or will the fire station and subsequently the taxpayers be responsible for the fire station's portion?
I think I can answer that. The public road from its current end at Josephine out to Lafayette, we see as being paid by the future developer. And that's basically the agreement across the fire district's parcel, is that they won't incur any of those costs. And in fact, the fire district has paid the applications fee for this modification request, but the church will eventually pay them back for that as well. And the portion across the city's, what's currently the city park, would be paid for by the developer. Any connections, any work out in Lafayette to allow for that connection will be done by the developer. I don't see there'll be any costs incurred by the city or the fire district outside the normal work that would be done in terms of approving plans or applications for subdivision and so forth.
So the city has, and or the church has a way to put that in writing to make it a binding agreement, so we don't, 15 years from now, when finally the economy turns around and we're all building houses hand over fist, forget that?
Well, excuse me.
The intent of the condition is just to require that be done before the partition occurs. It's not that the payment or any of those.
Oh, no.
specific
Yeah,
details.
just that there's an agreement that the road will be built at the developer's cost and not either of the two taxpayers' entities.
Just that the road would be built and as a part of the future land division, the future subdivision, before the partition gets platted.
A week ago today, I submitted to Pete a copy of the agreement, which has been signed by Ed. Hasn't yet. It's been approved by the church board as of yesterday, I understand, but hasn't actually been signed. I thought that might get into the record. I don't know if that was given.
You can enter it right now as Exhibit 1.
Okay.
Do they want it in the record?
Well, it's already been signed and approved, so it's, yeah.
Is it in their packet? Yes. Okay. I understand it's in your packet already. So,
Are there any
Well, we
other
can't
questions
access it.
for the applicant?
I do have one more. Since Ed isn't here, the layout of Josephine in the shadow plat, there's a really sharp turn in there. Has that been vetted at all by the fire district? Because I don't want to approve a road adjustment if that road isn't going to work and they need to approve it some other way later on.
you know, that I've had more comments about that road configuration, and I just put it on there just because I knew it was a shadow plat and it wouldn't have any binding. Actually, one of the discussions we had with Ed was in terms of this alignment, and I was more concerned right there where behind the fire district where we kind of have that street bulb, because I was concerned that might be an issue with them. And actually, when I met with Ed and the board of the fire district, they thought they liked that idea. Ed was not adverse at all to these sharp angles simply because it slowed the speeds down.
Yeah.
And
That does make it a residential street.
yeah, and the radiuses on the curb would meet the requirements of the fire district. Although, from comments I've had in front of the city commission previously, from comments I've had from the public works staff or engineering staff, I think it's unlikely that particular road alignment will be constructed that way. But the fire district didn't have any issues with it.
Okay, because like I said, I don't want to go through all this and then, oh, well, we'd never approved that to begin with. But I understand the basic point of this is which side of the fire station property is the road going to come out on?
That's correct.
And I guess the other question would be for Laura. Where it comes out on Lafayette is, Ed's here. Yay. Where it comes out on Lafayette is basically right on a curve. That's generally not good planning for sight distance.
I can bring up a map on that screen if you like, but the transportation engineers had no problem with sight distance. I'll show you on an aerial photo.
I also mentioned that it's on the outside edge of a curve and it's a low-speed residential street, so.
Right. It's just my concern is somebody trying to pull out onto Lafayette, and what are they going to see as somebody comes around? If they're trying to get up to the street lights. So.
Oh.
There we go.
Yeah.
So there's that
Where it is.
gentle curve you're referring to, and the road would come out in the same location.
The road's basically in the same location as the current driveway.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Right there.
Are there any other questions for the applicant?
Vice Chair Kidwell, I do have a question. So, Tom, I really appreciate the explanation. And Ed, you're right on time. We had our first question before 8 o'clock, but you weren't here. So we'll try to come back around to you. So what is since there's a lot of stuff on here, and I know it's not particularly part of this application, but since it is part of the record now, what's the necessity for doing this now?
Doing the application for the modification of the
Yeah.
partition?
That
Well-
wasn't really very clear in the staff report.
Okay, they had an approval for a partition, and that partition approval was contingent upon access coming out the South End Road. And so the reason for doing the modification is before the partition expired to get this modified to a way that it was acceptable to the fire district and to the city.
And then I guess the second thing is that I'm not sure which, because it's very tiny. I apologize here if I can't quite read it. It looks like it's sheet 1, and it shows a lot of it's this one with the highlights on it. So it looks like the church has some broader, long-range plans. And what I'm trying to get an understanding is that in the big picture, they would like to sell this off to someone, some entity, to do some redevelopment. And then they also look like they're proposing to have some
It's
future
effectively
additions.
the line drawing portion of that.
Yeah. So there's proposing to have some additions, and so that this is kind of what the idea is for some future.
Yes, in fact, that may have been part of the church's original conditional use. I'm not 100% sure because I wasn't involved in the original conditional use, but I think the original conditional use for the church did allow for some expansion, and maybe it's configured slightly different. But I am pretty sure there was some expansion foreseen when it originally came in.
Okay. Yeah, that one rectangular addition looks like it's awfully close to that lot line, or the some future in the distant future lot line down there.
Well, that heavy dash line would be the partition line. That addition would be close, would be a side lot line.
Side lot line.
Yes. So
Looks like it's a rear lot line. But
well,
what do I know?
Well,
Anyway,
when Josephine gets extended, it would be
Yeah.
a
but
side.
they're proposing to cut those
Well, that-
off in the future, and there's
That would be subject
yeah,
to
so some
approval
other thing.
at
Yeah,
a later
okay.
date.
Well, I think you've answered my questions. I can see why a driveway wouldn't be recommended, or a street coming adjacent to the fire station would not be recommended, because I would agree that there could be conflicts with the trucks coming in and out, and somebody trying, but again, having this past year seen somebody run the railroad crossing, if you think it might be possible, it is totally possible that somebody might do it, even though cooler heads should prevail. So I see that makes a lot more sense.
Are there any other questions by the commissioners for the applicant?
One last one. Sorry.
We'll hold you to that.
This says it's a 14-lot subdivision, but I count 15 lots.
A shadow.
Well,
I know, but it's been approved for a 14-lot subdivision.
No, it hasn't.
Okay.
It has not been
No.
approved for any subdivision.
Oh, okay.
and I think that 15th is the storm drain facility as it's shown there.
Okay. I can't read. It's so small, but okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I guess the only thing that, this seems very reasonable on its face, and even though they've said it like a jillion times, that I just want it very clear in some condition or somewhere that we are not approving this idea of a plat. I'm just calling it an idea because it's not a plat, it's not anything cast in stone. I just don't want anybody to assume that we have signing off on that, and we may not at this point be signing off on the alignment of that road either, or the future road.
There is no subdivision application at this time to even get to the approval of a plat.
Okay,
So I
good.
don't think we need a condition. There
Well, I'm
was.
just saying, just want it on the record
No,
that
yeah.
we're not.
Yep, it's a shadow plat. When it comes in for subdividing, it'll need to meet our turning radius and whatnot, and that's when we would work out
Okay,
the street
thank you,
alignment
Tony.
and lotting
Shadow
pattern.
plat is just for reference so that we can see that it is feasible for them to divide the lot.
Not only that, but we really utilize shadow plats to make sure that we get connectivity between large parcels that can be subdivided or partitioned in the future.
Yeah,
to
two
make
roads meet instead
Yep,
of
to make
just-
sure that we get those connections when needed.
But the onus would be on the developer to
The
bring
burden of
forward a
Right.
plat that meets all the requirements
Correct.
and get approvals for that
Correct.
in the future.
At whatever standard is in place when they apply.
Right.
Yep.
So, Mr. Kidwell, just because Ed is finally here, we should just have Ed, don't want to make it a wasted evening for him, so Ed, can we have Ed come up and he can tell us in 25 words or less why he thinks this is just great?
Or
And
not
we
just great.
love seeing him.
Well, and he needs to be able to speak to us at least one more time before his retirement is official.
Exactly.
I have a few more months.
Oh, good.
Well, thank you for the time this evening. As I'm sure you've already heard from Tom, is that we proposed to change the realignment of the road, and it was really for not just the safety of the firefighters, but for the citizens as well. We just felt it was a much better approach to have traffic entering South End Road at a controlled intersection, which will eventually have a signal on it, and I think that's the plan for down the road at some point. That as traffic continues to go up, that it's just a much better operation than having two streets entering South End Road, a higher speed traffic so close together. So it was just a better alignment, and it really has no impact on the fire district operations at the site. So we're just trying to be good neighbors.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the fire chief?
You don't have any concerns? I know you're losing 2 parking spaces.
And we've had discussions with the church about that for public meetings that would occur. They've agreed to allow us to use the church parking lot for overflow parking, and we're very comfortable with the configuration.
Great.
Could you state your name for the record?
Sure. It's Ed Kirchhoffer.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, thank you for your time. And now I guess we'll be taking public testimony from people who want to support the application.
No public comment cards submitted at this time.
Okay. Either for or against.
Correct.
Okay. So we can move on to questions from the body. Is that correct?
Don't have any. We got them all answered.
Anybody have any other questions?
It seems logical, the changing it going to not dumping on South End to me.
Can we close the public hearing portion of the
Please
Okay.
do.
public hearing is closed? Is there any discussion between the commissioners? Now, we have 2 actions that we're voting on here. Barry, can you explain what those 2 actions are?
We've got the modification of the site plan and conditional use to reduce the parcel size to 7,731 square feet and modify landscaping, parking, and access. And the reason we want to do a separate motion and a separate vote on them is in the event that one failed, the other one would move forward. So that's why. So we'll need a motion on the first one and then a motion on the second one.
Move approval for MD 11-1 modification of approved planning files SP 0026 and CU 0005.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
I think everyone seconded.
Question.
Commissioner Groner,
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin,
Aye.
Commissioner Kidwell.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Didn't get to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Maybe.
Aye.
Oh,
I knew I was going to tip the scales.
5-0. All right.
Do we have a motion on MD 11-02?
I'll do it. I would so move.
Second.
Take all the fun out of it. So
Do you want me to do the whole thing?
No,
Yes. I move the modification of approved planning file CU 0707 MP 0711 with conditions as attached in Exhibit 1.
Second.
We have a second.
All right. Commissioner Groner,
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe,
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin,
Aye.
Commissioner Kidwell.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
We'll look forward to seeing
We're
you
done with
sometime
this
in
matter.
the future.
We are.
Yes.
So I will go ahead and hand out, once again, I do apologize, we had a little trouble with Granicus tonight. So the next thing on our agenda was to talk about and adopt the 2011-12 Planning Commission goals and objectives.
You guys are done. It's all done. Thank you.
Questioning, will either one of these have to go beyond this point?
Unless you appeal it.
Thank you.
No, we should be done, so we should issue the notice of decision. And
Thanks for being cooperative neighbors. We like that sort of stuff.
Instead of the uncooperative neighbors.
So at our last work session meeting where we talked about the 2011-12 Planning Commission goals and objectives, we decided to add in a reference to the enabling legislation in the municipal code that was adopted, identifying the role and duties of the Planning Commission. I didn't think you wanted me to cut and paste the whole
No, there's no one page.
7-8 factors in there. Just reference that section. I think we had pretty much unanimous agreement about the 5 objectives and the wording under there, with spelling out some of the bullet points to add a little bit more clarity to what we're trying to accomplish underneath that goal, and then adding back in the status of current projects as well as projects that we continue to talk about but didn't make it onto the goals list for this year.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
Perfect. Very nice.
Great. So if there are no changes to that, we are
Move approval.
recommending that we adopt
Second.
these. Okay.
I think Laura might have missed it.
This looks good.
Thank you.
Commissioner Groner,
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe,
Hi.
Commissioner Henkin,
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Kidwell.
Aye.
5-0.
I can go ahead and give you a couple updates as well. I'm passing around right now an email that I received from Commissioner Stein this morning, resigning his position from the Planning Commission. He had some concerns about the information that staff provided concerning the Kent Ziegler annexation a couple months ago. As we brought that application through the process, there were several factors that we needed to consider, and we don't make recommendations to this commission lightly. We discuss those extensively internally as well as with our legal counsel. When we make those recommendations, we take that very seriously. We realize that you are a volunteer committee and you rely on our expertise to formulate your opinions and the recommendations that you do make. One issue, and like I said, I received it this morning. I replied to Mr. Stein via email, and I have not heard back yet, and I hope that I do, so we have a chance to talk a little bit more about what his concerns are, so that I have a fuller understanding, and then I can relay that information, as well as incorporate them if there are existing issues with our staff or myself. We create a ballot title, and I believe we included it in the Planning Commission packet this time. And we're well aware that the city is not able to lobby for or against ballot measures. Our role is to provide unbiased, neutral information. And we believe we've done that. We've used the same ballot title information. We're limited in the number of words we can use, both in the ballot and in the summary. We rely on the findings from the staff report in creating that language. Because of previous concerns raised by the Secretary of State with City Manager Frazier on some other ballot measures that he's dealt with in the past, he asked us to send it to the Secretary of State before we sent it to Clackamas County. But that was after it had been to the Planning Commission and after it had been to the City Commission. So once we sent it to the Secretary of State, sent back some comments with some concerns that the language in their opinion was
Not impartial.
Not impartial. Thank you very much. Our staff has looked at it. Our legal counsel has looked at it. We don't agree with what their concerns are, but to be prudent, we pulled it. We asked the commission to pull it off of the upcoming election and to delay it. And it looks like now we're going to shoot for the May 2012 election for the Ziegler annexation. And in that time in between there, we're going to meet with representatives from the Secretary of State to try and understand what their concerns are and what language would be appropriate. Because in our opinion, when you read the ballot title and the language in the summary, I can't think of, other than not providing information, I don't know how you would provide it in another manner. So we have some disagreements on that with the Secretary of State. There are other concerns that Mr. Stein raised, and I guess I'd hopefully have the opportunity to talk with him about those and what those are. So with that, at our next meeting, hopefully the commissioners can think about, we'll hold elections for the chairperson position as well as the vice chair at that time.
Well, wouldn't the vice chair step into the chair and we'd really only be filling the vice chair's position?
It would be coming up.
Anyway.
It'd be coming up anyway at January 1. We re-vote for the position. We could certainly just put him in as a temporary and then vote in January or at the end of December if you'd like. Or we could just do it now and be done with it. I'll leave that up to the commission.
Well, do we have new people coming in January?
No. They'll just be replacing Chair Carter's position at this point. There's no one up in this.
I just
in
wasn't
this
sure
year.
what the timing.
No, we've got another
There's only one.
a year or two before we hit another round of
Okay, so
people hitting their
I
expiration
wouldn't
dates.
want to cut something. We made all these decisions, and now
No.
you're
Coming up.
welcome.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I had a concern about at that meeting was the thing that obviously most of us are aware that subsequent to our decision, there was an issue with regard to the transportation planning rule, and I went back and did a little research myself, and I thought we were supposed to apply that at the time that we were reviewing it, and you did say that. So I think we have, there's more than one issue here with regard to that. So I think what I have a concern about is that we may have erroneously approved it when the actual recommendation the actual proposal didn't meet all the criteria because we omitted that one. My understanding is that there was an attempt, or I guess did Ed come up with findings to mitigate that or say, well, we're going to do this instead of that. We never I never got the follow-up on that. So I guess I have a concern about whether or not what we did was even valid. And if we're pulling it off, if being pulled off the ballot, I don't know, maybe we need to go back and reopen that because I don't feel that our vote on it really met the letter of the law, which we were supposed to be able to certify and say, yes, this meets all the criteria when it really didn't. And I don't know what ability we have to call that back up now that it's gone to the City Commission and they raised that issue. I don't know, Carrie, I don't know what to...
The issue was raised and the City Commission approved it 3-2.
With a condition that involved that
Yes.
particular item?
Yeah, and I unfortunately, I'm sorry, I forget the exact language.
Yeah,
I was on the phone trying to listen when we were up in Seattle when that hearing went on.
And it's hard to hear over the phone.
What it comes down to is that, in my opinion, and Carrie can follow up when I'm done here. We have an annexation code that's very dated. It was put in before we had voter annexation in Oregon City. Then we ran into, historically, until 2002, all the property inside Oregon City's urban growth boundary had been accounted for in previous transportation planning rule, transportation system plan updates. And
Inside the UGB.
because it was
Right.
inside
So
the
we
UGB.
already planned the TPR,
Right.
done the TPR
Right.
analysis.
So that's fine. And
No,
so
that's great. Thank you.
what we were running into when 10, 8 years ago, when folks would come in for this annexation, our code was somewhat unclear as to what do we do with them. Are they given the highest zone in the if it's low density residential, it could have been R10, R8, R6. What do we do with it? So we put in a clause that said if it has a comprehensive plan designation, it should become this zone. And that worked fine. If someone wanted R8, they came in for a zone change after the annexation. Then when we started adding properties to the UGB, we came into this situation where when we did the concept plans for Park Place and Beaver Creek, we didn't show TPR compliance when we adopted the concept
Right.
plans. So you have in Park Place this situation where they have a comprehensive plan designation, but the TPR compliance hasn't been shown yet. So, and then in Beaver Creek, we didn't adopt the comprehensive plan, so it still has this future urban Clackamas County designation. So when it comes in, it just stays FU, for future urban 10 acre.
Right.
So we're trying to mesh these multiple requirements, and what's the best way to do that? We felt that one option was you could have done TPR compliance with the annexation request. What's difficult there is that you're not approving a subdivision layout, you're not approving your infrastructure layout. So the alternative is that you agree to come in with no zoning, and that you come in for the zone change subsequent to approval of the annexation, at which time you need to show TPR compliance in order to get the zone change to whatever zone's in place. So what it comes down to is that how much upfront investment goes on, knowing that you still need to go through a vote, and that you still need to come back in for a subdivision at some later time. So do we want to front load that, or do we say, okay, we'll let you keep your county zoning if you get annexed, if you make it through the vote, then you come back and do your TPR compliance and your infrastructure adequacy. If you can't show that at zone change and comp plan amendment, then you remain county zoning until you can. So,
Chicken and egg.
yes. And, I think it's one thing that I've added and I've had discussions with Carrie about is having a work session on this, because this is an important policy decision. And the intent of the code changes we made back in 2004, where we identified a zone and said, if you have a comp plan, here's your zoning designation. It was trying to make it easier and less confusing. And we didn't foresee this issue where we're potentially going to be adding lands to the UGB and not show TPR compliance, and then what do we do? So I think that's some of the confusion that led to that. And we felt that we were making, we discussed it pretty thoroughly about showing compliance and what the options were. So that's
Well, I think-
trying to summarize some
yeah.
difficult
Well, I
policy
think-
decisions that were made.
I think what we need to do, I don't know the future and I don't have a crystal ball, but I think we need to look very carefully at any other issue that even remotely touches on this in the future. And I don't anticipate, do you anticipate we're going to be adding more property to the UGB? I don't foresee it. I think that we have reviewed and we have justified what we have in there now. And I know I was following very carefully the Metro process when they were proposing that said, hey, why don't you add this stuff in? And we said, thanks, but no thanks, because we already have adequate land for what we're looking at and what they thought we might need. And I had submitted some comments with regard to that, basically echoing what you had already said and what the city had already said from planning and from the city council before I was even on the planning commission, because based on everything I knew, we had adequate amounts of the different categories of land uses that we might need someday in the future. But I think that, you know, this is still problematic, and I'm a little bit distressed that this has gotten to the point to where it has upset a fairly valuable member of this commission with tenure and some history and background, that this has caused him such consternation that he felt he had no choice but to resign, and that's a little troubling.
I just was curious if there was any prior communication to this letter.
Unfortunately, there was none. I was never made aware of any of the concerns, whether it be with the annexation, the ballot title, or the other accusations or concerns.
It seemed to be indicated in his correspondence that there was more than just the annexation issue, and I just wondered if he had expressed those in specifics.
No, I did. Like I said, I did respond with an email, and I said I'd be happy to sit down and hear what the other concerns were, because I'm not aware of what they are.
Are we actively looking at the code and a way to mediate it for the future?
Was there a challenge to the ballot tile? I mean, isn't there's a
We
challenge
did.
process, correct,
Yeah.
Carrie, for that? And so there was not even a formal challenge. It was due
The
diligence
city
on our
manager-
part.
Yeah, the city
Yes.
manager brought it to the attention of the city attorney, and we reviewed it and went to the Secretary of State. And
I think, you know, that it's probably, they probably did I don't want to second guess anybody, but, you know, it's better to err on the side of caution than throw it out there, because the minute that is out, that there's issue, that can lead to a challenge by someone. And we've already done the self-correcting process
Absolutely.
ourselves, which I think is the best way to go.
But I will have to say, having worked in the political system in this state for a long time, ballot measure titles are always controversial. And that's, I think, why you guys sent it out to have it looked at again.
Yeah,
but
it's a good idea.
But the flip side of that, to not have had a challenge to that, also says something to me as well.
And we've used the same template, and we have very similar template to other jurisdictions ever
we
since
used the
I've
same
been-
template for a long
a
time.
long time. And I guess, you know, it would be helpful is to bring it back after we have the discussion with the Secretary of State, because honestly, when I read it, other than not providing the information, I don't know how you write it differently and provide something useful to the citizens.
Right.
I
Well,
mean,
at this
it-
point, though, what we're looking at, this was an internal Oregon City action to voluntarily withdraw the ballot
Yes.
title. It was not something that anybody took any action against the city.
Well,
That's
it never
correct.
made it. It never made it to a public venue to be
Would be
challenged.
challenged, right? So there wouldn't have been. But I you know,
Well, no,
maybe
I don't
we-
know if it got submitted. It was at
It wasn't submitted to
No,
the
it
county.
was pre-submitted.
Submitting, and maybe nobody ever submitted the original language to the Secretary of State's office, and maybe that's.
So
I mean, who knows? Maybe it's just
The
compounding.
point really is that the ballot title was not something that is relevant to the Planning Commission's review of the annexation question. The ballot title just happened to be in the packet. It would not necessarily have to be.
Well, and that's what I was
sometimes
going to
it's
ask.
not.
Yeah,
Sometimes we've
for some
drafted it
reason, we
after
just
the
put it
fact.
in this time because we had it
Is
ready.
the ballot title relevant to the decision
No,
that the
not
commission made?
No,
because
not at all.
Well, it's obviously been relevant to.
one person.
Yeah, and again, that's my. That's where my discomfort
But
comes in.
we did not approve the ballot title.
It wasn't a criteria.
Not specifically, no. I think we had it in the packet just as information. The city commission adopts the ballot title and summary as a separate resolution when they adopt the election date. So it was, you were reviewing the approval criteria of the application. We just put it in there because we had it ready to go, and it's just some a little more information we could get.
And we're always hammering you about information, so you did the right thing by giving us everything you had.
Right, that we had
I mean,
prepared.
to me, that's absolutely the appropriate thing, even if it wasn't relevant to the specific decision, it was there. And
Yeah.
so,
And so the city commission never did actually set a date?
Yes, they
They
did.
did,
And
so
then
it was at that some point.
Right, so we brought it back and requested that they pull it from that election date, one day before it was due to the county clerk.
One day before.
well,
Good.
Yeah. I like
So that's,
the error on the caution side.
yeah. And I would like to have a zoning work session that you were talking about all these, because it definitely needs to be as firm as in our heads as it is in yours when we're making decisions.
certainly.
So going forward with that particular issue, is that something that will come back to us, or is that going to be handled at a different level?
It's probably good to have the discussion with the planning commission, you know. I think I need to think through if we would like to do that, something as a joint one, or if we did it at this level first and then provided an update to the city commission to get their input.
I think you and I had talked tentatively about coming to the planning commission first and coming to the planning commission in mid-November.
Yep.
Because I remember chit-chatting with Ed about his schedule.
Right. Yeah. To bring more of a discussion about how do we want to do these annexations and moving forward, you know, kind of looking at what does our code say, you know, is it appropriate, is it getting us what we want as a product? And so that was going to be how I kind of referenced it, and that was before this was brought to my attention. So we can use this as a case study of exactly what happened.
So we would revisit this issue next month.
Yes, hopefully, yeah. Or I was thinking November.
Next month is
November,
October.
just because of other things that we have going on right now. Yeah.
And since we actually did approve that particular item, how is that dealt with? Do we overturn the approval and re-evaluate it, or
No,
how?
at this point, I don't think we have the ability to call it back at this point. It's been recommended to the city commission. It's been approved by the city commission.
It's at their level to do things at this point.
Yep. I mean, I suppose someone could go up when we request. We're going to request that they put it on the May ballot. Hopefully, if we can get everything squared away, I suppose someone could go and request that the city commission not put it on the ballot.
Or that prior to that, they remand it to us for review.
Well, but the land use,
wanna do
that part's done. This
Yeah,
is just a
I know, I
resolution.
understand that, and
It's
that's-
two different. They're two different requests.
So the land use action is
And
behind
I,
us.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the appeals have come and gone. I guess just real quick, if we're done with that topic, I'll give you one more quick update. You may have seen in the paper, both the Oregon City News as well as the Oregonian, some information about Metro looking at the Blue Heron Willamette Falls site.
That would be terrific.
So we have been working with Metro at looking at the possibility, and this is all very, very tentative at this point. We have a whole lot of due diligence to do on the site. We have stakeholder groups that need to be formed and commitments that need to be made before Metro and any other partners, including us, would move forward with any type of agreement or any bid on the property. Obviously, these discussions have been going on for a couple months between staff. When the bankruptcy attorney changed the process from an open bid process for both sides of the river, that was the original. It was going to be an open bidding process. He wasn't going to break up the two properties. It was all or nothing. That's obviously changed over time, and now all of a sudden it's become a closed bid process, and you can bid on either side or both if you would like. And then the window on the bidding was opened, I believe, August 24th or 22nd or so, and it'll close October 19th. So
Is Tri-City still interested in the wastewater treatment?
I believe so, but I haven't had any conversations with Tri-City.
It
about the
makes
property.
sense.
Yeah, based
know.
on what they need to put in
Right.
for
I
mitigation.
mean, I don't think any of us private citizens want to have our own wastewater treatment facility. Would be kind of strange.
So, with that, I can kind of answer broader questions, but any specifics about the property agreements or prices, we're not at a point. We don't even know actually what the bid is going to be yet. And we're still working on some due diligence.
Is that
Interested
going
to
to
know what the
be,
appraisals is?
if we partner, if that happens, it'll be in essence a Metro bid in partnership, correct?
With multiple stakeholders.
Do we have time between now and October 19th for those stakeholders to solidify something, to give a bid? Is that what you're saying you guys have been working on in the background for a while now, and,
Right.
and you feel like we could make that timeline?
It's
Tony.
It's possible. It's,
Okay.
It's possible.
It just
Yeah.
seems like
There's
a tight
gonna,
timeline.
even if we go through the due diligence and we can recommend as staff that this is a good idea, and if we can come up with a reasonable number, and if we can get all the stakeholder partners that we need in order to move forward, then we make a bid. And if that bid is accepted,
Like a lot of ifs.
of which the bankruptcy trustee doesn't have to
Accept it, exactly.
he doesn't have to accept it. He doesn't have to accept the highest bid. He can accept a lower bid that has a better contingency. We're going to have potentially quite a long contingency period to close on that property with certain requirements that need to be met.
What level of action would be needed, say, at the city level, for example? Would that be a city commission vote on a certain number? I mean, how would that work between now and the 19th? And how would that play with the Urban Renewal Commission for all of that?
I think that's something
go to
that
urban
we're still
renewal.
working on concerning when,
Yeah,
because we're not going to be able to have the
Yeah, it's
agreements written
outside,
up
yeah.
between all
Yeah.
stakeholders by the 19th. So there's going to need to be
Could be
commitments
added to-
that we would then come back and finalize and be part of the contingency of the sale of the property.
A lot of ifs.
But
Good project.
it's a good
Lot of ifs.
project. Yes.
What we need is a good January flood to tear all those buildings down and make it all Parton's problem. Yeah, I'm just,
I wanted to just reiterate the fact that I really appreciate staff's organization of the tour. It had been many years since I had been on the property, and a few things came back to me as I was going back through my pictures that I had taken on at the site, and I just wanted to, unfortunately you couldn't make it, but it was pretty awesome. How'd your pictures come out?
Not too bad. I haven't actually printed
Processed
them,
them,
but I just
processed them,
looked at I would concur. I think that the tour was very useful and informative from the standpoint of understanding what's there and going forward. If a proposal is brought to us, I feel better prepared to deal with some sort of a land use action on that.
Well, I have my electronic device out. I wanted to see if you could give us what's coming up for October, if anything. I'm trying to plan ahead. October's going to be a busy travel month for me.
My recollection was we had a date
There
certain
was
on October 10th.
the water master plan on October 10th, I believe,
Okay.
which
That's-
Pete will be here for. I will be on vacation.
That's still on?
That is still on
Okay.
at this point.
Okay.
We are one section away, the finance section, from having it done. Everything else is we've had and reviewed. I
Well, if
believe
it's-
that's all that we have right now.
If
in
it's
terms
tabled,
of
it won't hurt my feelings.
type 3 applications at this point.
Huh?
That's all that I'm aware of
Is
for
the
October.
water master plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if that is tabled, it would probably come back in November instead of 2 weeks later.
Okay. How soon will we know? The reason I'm asking is somebody else wants me to do something on the 10th, and I told them I can't tell them anything until I know whether we're having a meeting. I said I have it down as a meeting, so don't count on me.
Hopefully we'll know by Friday.
Okie doke. That's good
So
enough.
We
Thank
can,
you. I have it in there.
Okay.
You have anything else for us, Tony?
No, not at this point.
Are we done?
Or if
like
you
it.
hit the gavel.
Is this the world's record?
We're adjourned.
No.